Coming up.
I'm mimicking your podcast at I'm a Car Chick as well. This was my 30th year in the automotive industry. I've been at J.D. Power 11 years. Certain people just are underutilizing the feature and function capability that they've paid for.
Well, and not to mention, who honestly reads the owner's manual anymore, even though that's available in every vehicle?
The owner's manual is a consistent thing that people actually are looking at. There's a lot of conversation about how can AI influence, operations at a dealership. Very, very important to be able to help, streamline and create efficiencies and create a better customer experience. We're in the age that we have data. We no longer have to guess. We can be much more efficient with our time, our money that we spend. This has certainly been an area that there's a lot of tension and open questions with respect to
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the I'm a Car Chick podcast. Today's episode is something a little bit special and a little bit different. So we are currently in the month of November at the very end. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. However, we are on the cusp of NADA season, and that means that I get to find out all the cool things that are going to be happening in NADA, the events happening around NADA, and I got a reach out from J.D. Power to do a little bit of a special episode highlighting their summit that's going to be happening the first day of NADA, February 3rd. And I think I got the perfect person to talk to about it. So without further ado, introduce Kristin Kolodge. You are the VP Auto Benchmarking and Mobility Development at J.D. Power. Wow, what a title. That's amazing.
It's a mouthful. It's great to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for being here. And it's so awesome to get to learn more about you and more about J.D. Power and what you guys are doing. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes of everything, I would love if you could give us a little bit of background, how you found your way into the industry, how you found your way to J.D. Power and into the position you're doing.
Well, I feel like I'm mimicking your podcast title to say that I'm a car chick as well and have been in the automotive industry for this was my 30th year in the automotive industry, which is kind of tough to do the math, if you will, but also an honor to say that I've had that type of experience. So I've been at J.D. Power 11 years. Prior to that, I was at Chrysler and all things Chrysler named, if you will, for 19 years before that, and really came right out of college, right into the automotive industry. And that was really what I was seeking as I was an engineering student and wanted to be in this automotive industry. It's where I grew up. It's what I was interested in. And it was certainly what I wanted to be able to influence. And specifically what I wanted to influence was, how people interact with their technology, their features on their vehicle, and being able to, ask that type of strategic question of, why is this knob or button operate in this way, and being able to have a very intuitive solution for that.
It's really interesting that you say you knew when you went to college that this is what you wanted to do. What did you major in college?
So I studied mechanical engineering. I went to Michigan Tech University in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So in a very cold part of Michigan, lots of snow. And so I really did. I mean, it was one of those experiences that when I was young and growing up, my parents had one of those Oldsmobile 88 vehicles. And I remember one of the times that I got to sit in the front seat and interacting with the radio at that point in time. I didn't know how you set presets. And that was, back to the single DIN radio controller where you had to pull out the lever to be able to, set that preset. And I just remember asking that question to my parents of how would you know that that's what you needed to do? And they couldn't answer that. They're like, you just figure it out. And so for me, that was one of those initial moments in, my career that just, I wasn't satisfied with that type of answer. I felt like there could be better solutions. And so that's what I've really strategically centered my career around is that type of user experiencing and optimizing that to alleviate those types of situations.
It's so funny that you say that. Like, now that I think about it, like, every time I buy a car, if by chance there's something that the salesperson misses going over with me, like, I do the exact same thing. Like, why does this work the way that it does? How do I get to do this? How do I do this? Like, all of those different things. And it's those inquiring minds that are really just making the industry better, because customers have the inquiring minds too. And I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in, we know all of this knowledge, we know all of this technology. And so it becomes kind of back of mind, like we assume everybody knows it and they don't. And it's so hard to remember.
Absolutely right. And I can say that, across my career, we've had those types of conversations of, either very blatantly saying we're not designing this for engineers, right? That we have to think like a consumer. And that in many cases is very much a struggle, because, people think that something is very obvious when if you perform user testing to someone that doesn't have, they haven't been along that development journey, they start to pull apart that design and ask those types of very tough questions. And it becomes very obvious where, there's further optimization to be able to do. So it's a continuous evolution, certainly as consumer expectations change, their experience with other types of lifestyle technologies, how that influences their expectations inside the car. And, as technology is brought into the vehicle itself, right, it just really is, it's quite a challenge, but it's a very important one, because we certainly are, the emphasis is designing for these customers to be able to utilize. And sometimes that interaction is going to make or break that technology's, future success.
Well, and I imagine and I know that you work a lot and are planning to present a lot at the summit about this. Is it difficult to get accurate data back from the consumers about about the buying experience, making sure that you guys are asking the right questions to get the answers that you want, and having that information available to give back to not just the consumers, but also the OEMs about, hey, this is what's really happening out there when consumers are interacting with your product?
Well, one of the strategic areas of JD Power's business is that outreach to customers and understanding their experience. And so we have a variety of different types of research studies that we perform that really start to break apart that ownership and buying experience of that vehicle into different sections, so that we can create something that's very manageable, take that vehicle owner on that journey to be able to more deeply understand their experience. And so we cover things, everywhere from, if they just purchased a new vehicle, what was that sales experience? If, that initial 3 months of ownership, any problems that they've had, their level of satisfaction, what is the new technology that they're using, what do they think of that experience? And then we go all the way through 3 years of ownership as well. So for someone that's owned that same vehicle across that 3-year ownership period, how is that dependability, reliability experience? And then even, going into items such as, what is their service experience at the franchise dealer, getting down into different components like your tire experience and things of that nature. So we really have a full gamut that we're seeking to understand that customer experience to be able to help inform industry. Where do they stand? Where are their gaps? Where are their opportunities? Who's really doing it right in industry to be able to benchmark?
Does it feel like sales and service are progressing at the same pace?
So sales and service, this has certainly been an area that there's a lot of tension and open questions with respect to, customer expectations and how are they, even just when you think about the dealership itself and how complex these vehicles are. So when you have this type of product turnover that is bringing in
This episode is brought to you by Epic BDC, your number one outsourced BDC solution. Learn more about Epic BDC by checking out the link in the bio.
Very new types of technology. I mean, even just to talk about the electric vehicle technology that we've had in the recent last few years, that has been a significant challenge for the dealers to be able to become very informed and knowledgeable on, because we, those potential buyers that were coming in were very knowledgeable and also had very deep, specific questions. So that just started to expose this level of, are we preparing that sales team appropriately to be able to answer those types of questions? So, technology has certainly provided some tension into that sales experience. Even that element of recognizing just the having the right technology at the dealership itself to be able to do so. So it's been challenging. I mean, if I can give one other example, if you will, on the sales experience and thinking about, if the average age of a vehicle on the road today, I think it's approaching or right around that 12 years old mark. So if you think about someone coming to buy a new vehicle, in many cases, the technology that's on the vehicles today are things that they have never seen before, right? So touchscreen for an infotainment may or may not have seen. If you think about several of the driver assistance systems, right, you have the experience that lane departure warning or the lane centering or the adaptive cruise control where it's going to keep that, or even, systems such as like Blue Cruise or Super Cruise, where you might be able to take your hands off the wheel. So you can think about this type of sales experience and where there's so much to cover during that purchasing process, right? From F&I products and, the handing over the keys and all of the different, all of those steps to then, starting to coach and train on like these features that recognizing that someone might not have ever experienced that. So it's a very challenging area at this point in time that, industry and dealers are still very much actively working out how to continue to optimize that experience.
It's funny you mentioned that, like when people are trading in those older vehicles and going newer. My husband and I always pretty much have a fairly new vehicle. We renew our vehicles about every 2 to 3 years. So we're staying up pretty good with the technology. Our last purchase of a new vehicle was in 2024, and we bought a new 2024 vehicle, and we had traded in a 22 and a 23, and the technology difference in one model year was outrageous. Like there was stuff in there that we had no idea. And so we recently bought a car that we're going to end up handing down to our son, which was a 2008 vehicle, and getting in that one and going back and forth between the 2024 and the 2008, and like the technology difference, like you mentioned, the adaptive cruise control, the smart brights. I don't know what the actual name for that is, but when the brights will shut off when someone's approaching you, all of these different things. I mean, even to the fact that it didn't have Bluetooth, like I had to go get a certain cord to go aux, like so that I could plug into it. And it's all of those things that we really don't think about. Like I would never have thought to think about, telling someone about the smart brights or the adaptive cruise control, stuff like that. Like, hey, remember, you got to actually slow down when you have cruise control.
Exactly.
You really don't think about it until you're in that moment of having to think about it. And it's like, how do we even train our sales teams on that and make sure that they know to be having these conversations in these transactions? And I think that's a lot of what you guys are doing.
Yep, exactly. Right. So exposing that type of opportunity, that type of sales experience. And even, as you transition into that new vehicle owner experience type of studies with, problems and satisfaction, you can see that type of exposure coming through of like, hey, I just don't understand how to use this feature. So even this opportunity for, is there a second delivery or do we need to bring someone back? And how can we do that at a rate that's realistic and yet, feasible for both parties to be able to make that worth their time? But we really can see that exposure to this technology where there is that education and exposure gap that is leading to problems. And in several cases, what I would call lost value, where certain people just are underutilizing the feature and function capability that they've paid for on their vehicle, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, like, who honestly reads the owner's manual anymore, even though that's available in every vehicle?
It's funny you mentioned that. So that was always let me call it a running joke, if you will, or, just a running line, during engineering development. But I can say that as we, one of our technology studies that we conduct, we actually ask, how did you learn how to use it? And you can see a multiple variety of different options that people do, right? Like, hey, the dealer told me, or I had prior experience, or I went onto YouTube, or I went and looked at my owner's manual. But so surprising, like this technology study that we've run for the last 10 years, the owner's manual is a consistent thing that people actually are looking at. So if I can, say with data that it is utilized. And so even this transition from, many vehicles are shifting away from paper copies and going to a digital owner's manual now. So whether it be in the infotainment system or on their smartphone app that they have, for that particular brand, we do see people seeking out information. So it just underscores that element of, how people are seeking more information about these features and technology.
That's really good information to have. Let me ask this the right way. Is the same data available on the fixed ops side where we can see like what information people are wanting to know about the maintenance of their vehicle, like how frequently to get oil changes or how frequently to rotate their tires? Like, do we see them seeking out that same information, or do they just rely on the dealership to tell them?
Yeah, I actually don't have data on that particular point. It's a really good question. I just don't have the data to say, where they're looking on that maintenance side. But we do know that several manufacturers are doing more of this, AI generated predictive maintenance. And so we see that catching on a bit more where, the vehicle is going to tell me when it needs something and that more proactive and predictive fashion. So that seems to be that next cusp beyond the maintenance schedules that we're used to.
I learned this past year that some manufacturers, I don't know which ones all have it, but some of them have a technology in the vehicle that when service is needed, or say a light comes on the dash, will automatically, what is the word I need? Communicate that with the dealership for the dealership to call that customer and say, hey, it looks like there's something going on with your vehicle. We need to get that in for service. Like that. I mean, that alone is something that I wish would have been out years ago. But of course, we needed the advancements in technology to be able to have that. But I mean, how helpful and useful would that be if the vehicle service kind of just took care of itself and was like, hey, we're going to reach out to the dealer for you and let them know that you need service?
Absolutely. I mean, that what you're describing there is that power of a vehicle being connected to be able to help add convenience and safety and, just peace of mind, if you will, and creating that partnership back to the dealership as well. So just looking to, really holistically take care of that customer and the vehicle and have their best interests at heart.
Did you know that there's a monthly newsletter where you can keep in touch with everything the I'm a Car Chick podcast is up to? There is. Check out the show notes below, and you can also follow us on all social media and stay in tune with whatever we're up to. I love it. It's information that the dealer needs. It's information you guys need to be able to do what you do. Your portion of what's happening at the summit is the automotive franchise assessment. And I think you were telling me that there's 6 important parts that you guys cover on that, or 6 different topics you hit on. What are those 6, and which would you say is probably like the top one, the most important?
Okay, so maybe if I can take a step back and just describe the franchise assessment for the audience, so this is going to be a key element of that auto summit that you had opened up today's conversation with. And so the franchise assessment is where myself and 2 other colleagues of mine at JD Power, we go through and assess all of the brands across industry, utilizing like the wealth of data that we have here at JD Power. So we have, let's call it 50 to 60 different types of variables that we are measuring for each of these brands across all of their models that they have. So the 6 categories that we have are brand strength, new sales opportunities, used sales ops, product strategy, F&I performance, and fixed ops. And so in terms of, which one of those is the most important category, they each have their own, let's call it, weight associated with it, like that level of importance. And realistically, it's a hard question to say, like, if you do well in this one area, you're going to do well against your competitors, because it is such a benchmarking type of exercise that you're continuously, each of these variables, pitted against your competition. And so you might have areas that you're, like a particular brand is doing really well in versus, where they have strategic gaps. So it's really comes down to a much more individualized brand assessment to say, like, if we're talking about brand X, maybe their most important category that they need to focus on is product strategy, whereas brand Y, their key strength is new sales opportunities, and they need to continue to own that. And so that's the type of information that we're going to get into a really granular level of detail at the conference to be able to, just describe where each of these brands and how they're performing and where those opportunities are.
So when you say product strategy, break that down for me and the audience as to what exactly it goes into product strategy.
So product strategy is where several of our voice of the customer research products are. So those, when I was talking about that type of ownership experience, that first 90 days of ownership, what are the problems someone's had? What's the level of satisfaction? What's their experience with the technology? What's that dependability and reliability at 3 years of ownership? I mean, those are some of the key variables there. We also go through and cover, look at that type of coverage that brand has. Are they covering all of the various segments, or are they really heavy into a particular area, right? Are they truck heavy and not, a full portfolio type of brand? We also go through the electrification strategy and understand where they are in that as well, relative. And again, each of these metrics is very relative. So relative to the rest of the competition, right? Is someone very overexposed? Are they underexposed, right? And really looking at that type of, is the coverage right-sized versus where the market is at that point?
And this may be a really stupid question, but when you guys are analyzing all of this data, is this only for information in the United States, or is this worldwide?
So while JD Power has, multiple global studies, this particular franchise assessment is specific to the United States only.
That's good to know. I don't know if you get to work a lot with the data from other countries, but how does the United States compare to other countries, if you know any of that? I mean, not even the granular stuff, but just at an overall, how does it compare?
Well, when you look at these studies, like we have several studies, like our initial quality study or our technology study, that are performed in multiple markets. So you can see that there's quite a difference in consumer expectations. And in many times, like, that's really the driving factor in the difference there. So you have some countries like China that are very tech forward and really wanting to have more smart features and more of the vehicle taking over control, where you have other markets like Japan that are more safety focused and want to, emphasize the safety and control and all sorts of different elements there. But it really just continues to emphasize that point that there's not a one size fits all solution for all markets, that you really have to know the market that you're going into specifically and recognize that you might have to have some region specific accommodations accordingly.
Well, and I think about that, like, I heard a statement a while back that the rest of the world doesn't realize that the United States is really just essentially almost 50 different countries in one, because you can cross state lines and have a completely different demographic, way of life, way to do things. And so I think about that, like, when dealers are expanding into other states, how useful the information that you guys provide is for when they're moving to a different state or a different area, to know, what they're going into, what they need to be considering, the different vehicles they're going to be selling, where we see in one area of the country are more truck heavy, and then others are more EV focused or more sedan SUV focused. And all of this information that you guys are collecting on a daily, monthly, yearly basis to have available for those dealers is kind of huge.
Well, I appreciate you recognizing that. And it really is an important element. I mean, when you think about vehicles, and, some vehicles have to have different types of emissions certifications by state and other ones don't. When you think about someone going to purchase an electric vehicle, and that, certain states have different types of incentives associated with them. I know that, at this point in time, the federal EV incentives have gone away, but there still are state-based types of incentives. And even, getting down to local levels, you might have some particular electrical power companies that offer incentives and things of that nature. So just coming back to that point of really knowing the region that you're operating in, knowing that community really well, is going to give you a better leg up on serving that community as appropriately.
Definitely. And you guys are doing the work to do that. One of the things that we had talked about ahead of time that we wanted to make sure that we touch on is the information, just kind of like a little tidbit to the dealers of what you guys are seeing customers are happy about versus where they feel that things are struggling. And it may not even be like a full giveaway to what you're going to be discussing at the summit, but just some key pieces of places that we still need to be paying attention to, that maybe with all of the AI talk or all of the buzzwords that are out there happening, that we forget to go back to the basics and remember what the consumers are actually looking for. So what are some of those things that we have to keep reminding people, hey, these are important first and foremost before we even try to speed up the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So maybe if I can give a couple answers in a few different buckets, if you will. So
this episode is brought to you by SCP Agency, your one-stop shop for organic social media. Check them out by clicking the link in the show notes or visit scpagency.com.
If I was to take that question and apply it to someone needing to do service on their vehicle, right? In one realm, we know that, there's a lot of conversation about how can AI influence, operations at a dealership. Very, very important to be able to help, streamline and create efficiencies and create a better customer experience. And when we think about just taking it back to the basics, some of the basics that the customers are still reporting on is like, hey, I want to be able to get an appointment scheduled without having to wait a week, or in some cases more. So in that realm, you can just see where, we're still trying to get some of those basic experiences alleviated, but by all means, we can then supplement that with the argument of how can AI or other types of operational changes be able to help minimize that type of wait time. In terms of, other areas, if I was to go back to product and just talk about some of the basics, I mean, right now, when we think about even just your example of the 2008 versus your vehicle today, I mean, some of the basics for interaction for vehicles today is I want my smartphone to seamlessly connect to the vehicle. And, that's one of our top problems in industry, is where it doesn't always happen that way, right? Sometimes it's slow to connect. Sometimes it won't connect. Sometimes you have to, turn your vehicle off and restart it again. And sometimes it just drops you after you've been connected for a while for no reason, right? So lots of these types of connectivity challenges. I mean, right now, that's our top problem for new vehicles, as well as vehicles after 3 years of ownership, is that type of smartphone interaction. So it just emphasizes, again, the basic of like, hey, I want my vehicle's an extension of the rest of my life. And so I need these lifestyle types of technologies to be able to continue to work. And this is my expectation versus, the experience that they're having is quite problematic right now. So even as industry continues to make changes and evolutions, right, we know new smartphones are coming out on an annual basis and new updates, et cetera. So it's continual challenge to chase over time. But again, those are just, when you break it down to the basics of, someone just wants to stay connected, and to them it feels very black and white, but we know it's much more challenging.
It's funny you mentioned that. The 2024 vehicle that we own, when we bought it, and I still to this day, I never really researched it or anything like that. When we bought it, it had wired CarPlay, and you had to plug in to one specific place in the console to be able to have the Apple CarPlay. And then one day the CarPlay just kind of like stopped working, and it was like an annoyance, but it was like, I'll give it a couple of days to see if it fixes itself, then I'll call the dealership. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like a day and a half later, it was wireless. And I'm like, I don't even know how that happened. If it somehow connected to my home's Wi-Fi in the garage and did some sort of update, but like was mind blown. I'm like, how does it just switch from wired CarPlay to wireless CarPlay? And then all of a sudden after that, we had wireless CarPlay. And I mean, we've had a couple of glitches here and there between then, but like to know that could even happen was kind of wild.
Yeah, that you're bringing up, something that the industry has been doing now for a few years, right? This was really started by Tesla, this concept of over-the-air updates. So very similar to what we're, accustomed to on our smartphones, but now being incorporated into the vehicles, and then really looking to be extended significantly going forward. So as we think about, the architecture of vehicles changing to something where it has more of a, what we'll call a centralized brain, right? That's going to be able to allow more features and functions to be able to be updated. And so like the blue sky vision is that, your vehicle really, in theory, isn't going to age from a software perspective because we can continually keep you updated, right? Versus what we're used to when you drive your vehicle off the lot, right? That's as new as it's going to get. It's only going to age everywhere from that point on. So it's really a new type of concept. And so we see several manufacturers, having different strategies. Some are going to have different types of notification, right? Some would have notified you or waited for you to push that out. Others are doing it more in the background. Lots of different types of executions, but you can certainly see there's a varying customer experience that goes along with that too, right? In some cases, a surprise and delight if it goes well. In other cases, if it was like, I wanted the old, I really didn't want it, yet it was pushed, right? So you can just see that there's a spectrum of opportunities, but it is really exciting for us, within the industry to be able to think of just continuing that relationship with the customer beyond the point of sale of the vehicle. You touched on the spectrum of what people want. And that makes me wonder how you guys, and I imagine, you guys are flooded with data every day. I can't even imagine all the information that you guys have. But when looking at the spectrum of people, certain age ranges and demographics of people are going to want different things. So we look at, maybe the older generations, the boomers and older who prefer to have less technology or prefer to have things a little bit easier to maneuver as opposed to staying up to date with times, where we look at the younger generation, millennials and younger, and we want more technology. We want, things as automated as possible. How does that take into effect when you guys are presenting data, like knowing that you guys have to be somewhat pull from each pool of people, where we may see more boomers buying, but the data over here is still important too. So like, how does that shift kind of happen with your guys' data presentation? Well, what you're describing there is where we have the ability to take the data and analysis down to those different types of levels. So we can look at it by demographic and say like, okay, here's where the brand performs for this particular, attribute or response as a whole, but pay attention to, who's leading and who's lagging, that type of response. We can also look at things by different psychographics as well. So, because not all boomers are really tech laggers, and not all, millennials are early tech adopters, right? So you have different behavioral patterns along the way. So we have different types of attitudinal questions that we ask as well that play into that type of analysis. You can look at things regionally. You can look at things by loyalty, right? Is this their first time owning of this brand? So does that change the experience? So, what you're describing is a really important aspect of the analysis that we can provide. Again, back to that mantra, there's not a one size fits all solution. Same for, while here is, the response to this type of interaction, here's where, as you slice it thinner, you can see in particular where the gap and opportunity might be.
That's got to be such good information for the dealerships to have. I mean, especially when considering like marketing and all of that, just to know like, hey, this is the path that we need to take here, or we're over marketing to, this.
You've made it this far, and I have to say thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to rate the show, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and of course on all social media channels. Light it up.
This demographic of people, and we're completely missing this demographic over here, and we need to make sure that we're hitting all of those and hitting them with these different messages, or making sure that we're offering mobile service to these people, or so on and so forth, and just taking all of that into consideration. And I just think about the days of being in a dealership and how it's so hard to even get them to think about marketing in general, and let alone segmenting that marketing. And the consumers are left to pay for it, essentially.
Absolutely. We're in the age that we have data. We no longer have to guess or just do trial and error and kind of, see what's going to come back. We can be much more efficient with our time, our money that we spend, and be able to utilize data, both benchmarking, like what others are doing and learning from them versus, how we're performing in particular as well. I mean, if I can go back to a product example, maybe in that realm. So we have several manufacturers that have taken the glove box and put that in, like remove the glove box handle and put that into the infotainment system. And same with the garage door, like the garage door opener, like removed that from, what used to traditionally be a sun visor and now put that into the infotainment system. This was something that was done like well before 2020 and not met with very good customer response, but yet we've had manufacturers still do it to this day and not realize that others had done it with and had that type of lesson learned, if you will. And so even as we, had that type of conversation with various manufacturers and talked about like that the information was out there and present, you could see where it wasn't well known. And, just that opportunity was missed to be able to not be surprised by that type of customer reaction.
That's, I was just thinking to myself, like, I've never had a vehicle that had a garage door opener in the infotainment system or the glove box control. Like, I still have the one that you got to open the glove box. I still have my garage door opener on my sun visor, and like trying to think about, and I wonder if it wasn't well received because we're such creatures of habit that we're just going to go up to press that sun visor every time, or we're just going to reach over for that glove box every time. And it's so hard to retrain ourselves. If that's maybe why, I don't know why it wouldn't be so well received. Because like, that seems like, I mean, you don't have to replace the battery in the garage door opener and all of those things. But that's really interesting to me. Like, I know that's a very specific example, but
right. But a lot of times it comes down to like the use case and the execution. So, just to dive a little bit deeper in that garage door example, just to pick on that one for a moment, like in that situation, it was, you now have the backup camera. So as you're backing up out of your garage, for instance, then the backup camera would, like in this particular execution, it took the whole screen. And so you no longer had access to your garage door opener. So then you had to back up, put it back in park, wait for the screen delay, right? Because your camera stays on typically a few seconds. And then, so you can see where it just, it's challenging that premise of, is this really making my life easier? And so much of the technology feature success is going to be like, is it really making my life easier or not?
I had a thought earlier and I wanted to go back to it. And it sucks because it was while we were talking about service, but we transitioned really fast. Is there any way, so there's a couple of brands, and I don't want to name names, but there's a couple of brands that are a little bit more forward thinking with mobile service. Do we see the customer experience numbers improving with those brands who are being more forward thinking about mobile service as opposed to the ones who aren't?
Mobile service is really a good start. And this, I think, back to that element of, is it making my life easier? And when you have the dealership coming to you, it is. And we're seeing that, high levels of satisfaction as a result. So it really is starting to tap into something special, something that's working well for customers. I think there's a very well understood point of view that it's not all service can be done in your driveway, but of that, quite a large majority can be done in that way. And it does make it, that convenience is paying off for the consumers. They do appreciate that.
I can imagine. Like I think of all the times that I don't buy with a brand that does mobile service, but there's a lot of times where I wish I had it. Like I don't have to leave work or, take half a day off to go get all of my stuff done, which I had to do last week. I had to get, the oil change, the tire rotation, the brake fluid exchange. Like it was like 30,000 mile service. So it was a big one. But I just think about how much some of that could have been done remotely. And, maybe even just the oil change, even if it was just that, just to have that headache taken off would be great.
Yes.
So we have the summit coming up. I know it's in February. It's ahead of the NADA show. Do you have a little bit more information you could share with us about where it's at, when it is, the times, and if tickets are still available, information like that?
Absolutely. So the Auto Summit show hosted by JD Power will be held in Las Vegas on February 3rd. So it's a single day show right ahead of when the make meetings start for NADA. So I think the show runs about 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so it's going to be packed with great content from specific OEM keynotes, dealer panels, lots of really relevant topics that we know are hot in the industry right now. The franchise assessment that I'll be a part of with my two colleagues from JD Power, that will run from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Local time there in Vegas. So hope to see you there. Definitely tickets are still available. So you can reach out to jdpower.com and be able to find that type of information.
That's such good information. I can't wait to be there. I'm going to love every bit of information I get. I know I'm going to be a little note-taking machine, so I'm really excited for that. If anybody listening in the audience would like to connect with you personally or, ask you any questions, what's the best way to do that?
So you can reach out to me at kristin.kolodge@jdpa.com. Otherwise, you can find me on jdpower.com's website as well. I'd be happy to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristin, for coming on today. This was really good conversation. I'm really excited for seeing what the data presents at NADA and how we're, moving things forward. I feel like we're all just trucking along every day, trying to make sure that we're out here making a difference. So really excited to see what that difference is.
Well, I really appreciate the time to talk with you and your audience and looking forward to seeing you in Vegas.
Awesome. I will definitely see you there. Audience, until next time, be sure to check out the JD Power Auto Summit, and I will hopefully see you guys there.